Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home. Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Welcome to the Freebirth Society podcast. This is a radical space for women who are ready to celebrate their autonomous choices in birth, motherhood, and beyond. Together, we'll learn about wild birth through personal narrative, we'll explore the politics of birth, and we'll analyze everything that relates to our lives as women from a feminist perspective. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Welcome, Kendra.
Hi, good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. We were just saying, I'm saying this a lot on this season, that it's a long time coming, and you've been in my life, in my awareness for quite a few years now, huh?
I think I joined the membership maybe 5 years ago, and then just kind of like thumbed through stuff. I wasn't even pregnant. It wasn't even like on my radar yet. It was just like looking for community and like met women. And so I think I probably just like lurked for a long time. And then when I decided I was gonna have a baby, I was like, okay, let's really lock it in here. And
we should make an option in the membership on your profile to just put lurker.
Yeah,
Well,
as
you
your
know,
title. Totally. Except
lot
now
of
I'm
women.
like too invested in it. I would never get to wear the lurker title. I have like relationships within the membership. I would never get to use it.
And so were you already living in Utah when you joined?
Yeah.
Okay, but it was before your first child.
Yep. Okay. I was just new to Utah and just looking for a community. It's like I didn't really know anyone here. And so I was like, well, the online space is easy to connect people all over and kind of like find like crunchy community. And I actually don't even know how I came across Freebirth, if it was just like suggested in the algorithm or if I was doing some sort of a search on like radical women or something, but I got connected. I was like, all right, let's test this out.
So have you met women in your local area from the membership?
We've had conversations. It's one of those things where one of us, the person that's closest to me, one of us has been pregnant or like early postpartum, kind of back to back. And so we've chatted a little bit, but haven't made the connection yet. There used to be a radical birth keeper in my area, but I think she's moved. Utah feels like one of those kind of like transient places. Like Montana, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, like mountain people feel like they kind of come and go.
Yeah. Okay, so we're here to hear your big stories.
Yeah.
I've never really heard them all the way through like we will today, so I'm looking forward to that. And so I'd love to just start with you sharing a bit of a snapshot of who are you before your first pregnancy? What's your orientation to birth at this point, to the medical system, like a little bit of, just like what's your life like? What are you about before the pregnancy? And then just walk us into that first pregnancy and then that birth story.
Yeah. So my family in general was pretty indoctrinated in the medical system. I mean, got all of the regularly scheduled vaccines, and if anything was wrong, you'd go to the hospital. And I was kind of always the black sheep of my family in that sense. Like I very clearly remember like making my own remedies for things like in middle and high school, like making avocado masks for my hair and egg and stuff. And my family being like, you can't just like use our groceries for this. And so I just always thought like, yeah, you go to the hospital to have a baby. I mean, my grandmother had four C-sections. My mom had 3 C-sections.
Wow.
And my sister, who now has 5 kids, she had all vaginal births, but all in the hospital, all with epidural and kind of the standard routine of, getting ultrasounds and prenatal visits. And actually, I didn't want kids, which is so crazy because now I'm like madly in love with motherhood. But just kind of a story of like a lot of trauma growing up. Just really chaotic family stuff. There's addiction and abuse and broken relationships, and just really like not a good model for not only like a family, but like specifically like a matriarch. Like there were matriarchs in my house, but they didn't have like clear boundaries, or just they weren't very clear or clean. It was like kind of muddled. And so I thought I wasn't going to have kids. And I moved to Utah and I met my boyfriend, I don't know, within a couple of months. And it was like right in. We were spending like hours a day talking. Like I didn't have a TV. And so we were just like really getting into like the heavy hitting topics. We're talking like politics and religion and kids and trauma and vices and all of this stuff. And I just kind of was like, yeah, I don't see kids for me. And it was really just because I had a lot of my own shit. And it was like, I would never want a kid to go through what I've been through. And so one way to prevent that is to just not have kids. And after just like a lot of like self-reflection and just kind of like being honest in my relationship with my boyfriend, I realized that that was the reason. It had nothing to do with not wanting kids. It was just like, well, I've got a lot of stuff here that would maybe keep me from wanting to have kids. And after we had gone through that, I got pregnant maybe a year into us dating. And totally, I'll give you the whole timeline as we go through, but like in a matter of 5 years, we've had 15 lifetimes. But yeah, got pregnant right away. And I was so excited. And I remember, like, of course, buying the pregnancy test, and I did like 10 of them because I was like, okay, well, this one says it, but surely these ones won't. And I go through all of them, and we're super excited. And we're kind of going through all of this craziness of getting ready to build a new house. And there's just like a lot going on. It was the beginning of COVID. And so everyone's going home and just a lot. And I end up going to the bathroom one day and I'm spotting. And I'm like, okay, well, this seems too far in to have been like an implantation bleed, and it seems like too much blood to be viable. So I end up calling like a local midwifery practice. And I'm just like, hey, this is kind of what's going on. Can you walk me through maybe what it is, or just like give me some insight here? Just like really looking for like a bit of comfort, I think, and like a woman to lean on that could say, like, yeah, this might be what's going on, or this isn't what's going on. And they get me in right away. And I'm not sure what I expected, but I just get kind of like a surprise ultrasound. So I'm going in and she's just like, how are you feeling? We can take your blood pressure. And so I'm like, kind of,
A transvaginal?
no, just like an abdominal one.
Oh, so you're already how far along?
Oh, maybe like a couple of months.
Okay.
It's pretty early.
Okay.
And but I'm just like laying there and she's kind of just like feeling my belly. And it seriously is like in the blink of an eye, she turns to me and like has it like on my belly. Like my stomach is bare. And so she just kind of feeling, I'm like, okay, I'm fine with this. And I've already, made contact with Free Birth Society at this point. And so I'm thinking like, I know that I don't want an ultrasound. I know kind of like my boundaries are kind of starting to shore up a little bit. And it seriously, she just turns and it's like, no warning. And suddenly she just like goes, yeah, I don't think it's viable. It could be what is it called when there's like a little blood, like a hematoma? Is that what it is? Yeah. She's like, yeah, she said it could be, but we'll just watch over the next couple of days. And if you want, we can take your blood to see how your hormone levels are going. And if
Wait, so she's like, it could be nothing, or it could be totally not viable.
yes, but either way, you can definitely take your blood and you should come back every 48 hours until we see if it is climbing or falling.
Okay.
And that was kind of it. It was like there was no like comfort at all, or even like bedside manner. And she's really one of like the renowned midwives in the area. And I just remember like just shock, like kind of leaving there like, oh, I wasn't expecting that or that. And I got all of this, and now I'm just supposed to go home. And I remember my boyfriend at the time was at work. And so I'm just like sitting at home, like in a state of confusion and uncertainty of like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I end up miscarrying. And yeah, I just remember like this feeling of like I wasn't gonna go back into the system or the hospital or anything like that to like work through the miscarriage. It felt like my body was handling it. But I remember feeling like it was taking longer than I thought it should or would. It's like I'd never been pregnant before. And I remember just like telling my boyfriend, like, I just want my body back. Like it just felt so foreign. Um, and then after that miscarriage, it like really lit a fire in me. I was like, I didn't realize how bad I wanted to be a mom until I'd lost the potential of that baby. And so after that, we got pregnant my very next cycle. And as is after a loss, you get like that nervous feeling of like, is it real? Is it too early to get excited? When should I start feeling things? And that's when I kind of start to drift a little bit, back towards not necessarily going in. I had a wild pregnancy up until 20 weeks, but I'm like Googling things like how soon should I start feeling kicks? Or what are the signs of pregnancy? Or what are the chances of miscarriage after your first one? And so just kind of like disembodied.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're afraid.
yeah, totally. I'm
Mhm.
like, I can't let myself get too excited because what if it happens again?
Totally.
And it does not. I continue to grow and strong symptoms, and then I have a belly. And so around 20 weeks or so, I start thinking like, okay, well, what is my birth team gonna look like? And I'm thinking, okay, well, if I could find like a cool midwife and like a rad doula to support me at home, like that's what I would want. Like I would want to be out of the system, still not fully understanding that like they are one and the same, just at different locations. And I
And
turned,
one often leads to the other, right?
I know all too well.
Yeah.
And so I turned to Instagram because Google just like not pulling up much. Like honestly, I'm looking for like a Black midwife, doula, someone who can understand the complexities of being Black and pregnant, living in a predominantly white and very religious state, that like I can count on to, go to bat for me.
Does she exist?
Not from what I found. I've heard kind of some rumblings. I know of some really, really awesome doulas, both certified and not, but both licensed and not licensed. But I don't know of, I guess I maybe know of one, maybe one Black midwife, but that was after I'd gone through this, and that's how I came to know her.
And doulas aren't licensed. I think you mean certified.
Certified,
Yeah.
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 And so I end up finding this fantastic doula, and she just kind of like, she tells me like, hey, I just want you to know I'm not certified if that's a concern of yours. Like, I don't care. I love that. Let's do it. It's an immediate yes for her. And then the midwife that I find is, she's a white passing woman who is like uh, very strongly claiming her roots of being like indigenous and having grown up on a reservation. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is as close as I can get. And it seems like, okay, let's do it. And just kind of from the jump, it wasn't great.
Ugh.
It wasn't great. Like I didn't want to do ultrasounds. I didn't want to do tests. And so as the weeks kind of go on, I'm thinking like, I think I just like hired a friend. If
Mm.
and I don't know that she was always very warm to the idea. Like I just didn't feel like I needed her services. Like I didn't hire her until 20 weeks, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to do ultrasound. I do want to do the Doppler. I don't really want to do any tests. Like it would just be nice to have someone come and like palpate my belly and like drink tea and then like reassure me that this emotional roller coaster that I'm on is,
And you said that stuff.
yeah.
And her response was,
Um, Fine. It was like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. It's like, I would love to be that person for you. It was very convincing. It's like, I'm thinking at this time, like, I've found the one. Through
oh,
all of
okay.
the internet sleuthing, I have found the one midwife who is licensed, will attend a home birth, but is also like supernatural and open to like a woman-centered birth where she doesn't have to intervene.
I remember you posting about her pre your birth.
Yeah, and
I
plot
don't
twist.
remember exactly what it was, but I remember because it always stands out to me when women, say what you just said. You said something about like I am choosing to go with a licensed midwife, and she's like totally on the same
Yeah,
page.
and sold it so well that I was like, okay, this is the work. And so we do like the prenatal visits that don't really include much other than just kind of talking and measuring and palpating, and that's fine. Um, and then pregnancy goes on without a hitch. I have easy breezy pregnancy. I feel great throughout. And then we start getting towards the end, and I'm at, 40 weeks, comes and goes, 41 weeks, comes and goes, 42 weeks, comes and goes. And I start kind of getting just like little nudges from her that are like, hey, like I know we still have some time, but I want you to know that at 42 and 6, I legally have to transfer your care to an OB. I can no longer be your midwife. And so the panic ensues that I'm like, "Ugh, well, crap. I've been intentional in having you walk through this pregnancy with me so that you could be at my birth. And now suddenly there's this thought being introduced that like, not only will you maybe not be there, but I could be passed off to someone I haven't had a single appointment with. They have no idea of my history, no investment in like my birth outcome. And so it just kind of like keeps getting brought up. And so she suggests the midwives brew, which is like, why? Which is like the toxic mix of like the castor oil and the tea, and I don't remember what else is in it, but the goal is to induce labor. And so finally I'm thinking, okay, if I can start my labor at home, even if I have to labor for a few days, I could have my baby before 42 and 6, and I could keep the care that I originally wanted to go through with.
That's the
Yeah.
whole pressure and pitch. Yeah.
Yeah. And lo and behold, it does start my labor kind of in the middle of the night. And I remember like leaning over the bed. I'm on my knees, leaning on the bed, and I'm like, whoa, okay, this seems like it could be it. And I wake my boyfriend up and we call the midwife, and I download this app to like track my contractions. And from the start, it immediately says like time to go to the hospital. And so I'm thinking, okay, it's on. Like I'm gonna have a baby soon.
Hmm.
And the midwife shows up and just kind of like palpates my belly, sees how I'm doing. And I remember asking her, like, I can't get comfortable. Can you help me with like positioning or something to ease this? Like I just don't feel well. And she told me, if you're needing help with positioning, it's probably time to call your doula.
Hey, if you are new to all the things we're talking about on this show, then you need to go grab our most popular free resource, the Freebirth Starter Kit. It's a crash course in everything you need to know to start wrapping your head around the world of sovereign birth. The starter kit includes over 3 hours of teachings from me on how birth works, what all this new language means, like wild pregnancy or radical birth keeper. I touch on emergencies, complications in free birth, postpartum care, including the placenta and umbilical cord care, dealing with the what ifs, nervous partners, and more. We love resourcing our listeners, and this Freebirth Starter Kit is rocking people's boats and blowing their minds. And best of all, women are using it to birth in power, which is what we are all about here at FBS. Grab it in the show notes below and enjoy.
And I'm thinking,
Whoa.
oh, so I'm like in it, and
Wow.
you're already kind of like stepping back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is medical midwifery. She doesn't do hip compressions. She doesn't make you food. She doesn't clean up. She doesn't put the birth tub away. She doesn't tend to you at all.
No.
It's wild.
Yeah. And so I call my doula, and she's all too happy to come over. And
Because
she's
she's like a real midwife.
well, that's the thing. Yeah, she's not like a lineage of, birth keeping in her family. She's not certified. And she just like comes over and like holds my hand and like brushes my hair out of my face and gives me sips of water and pours like warm water on my back while I'm laboring in the tub and just like gives affirmations when I need it.
She midwives you.
Yes.
This is literally what it is. It
Yeah.
really stands out to me that you were so honest. And I think everyone who's looking for a midwife is looking for that sister, and it's just so, you saying earlier around, her like forward facing indigenous roots stuff, and you really looking for, like what I hear is you're really looking for a sister, and you're like, identifying in you the ways that sisterhood would be like flagged to you and meaningful to you. All the while you have, without knowing, because it's a new territory, the government literally standing between you and this woman by choice of her.
Yeah.
And then I guess, you as well, of course, but you're more like the naive one in this whole thing. But it all just is so, it's so predatory how women are, like, these midwives are really groomed for what becomes woman on woman violence and betrayal, when it's like this sweet, sweet call in your heart as a new mother to be initiated in sisterhood. Like, that's all I'm hearing, right?
And I think it's particularly hurtful, like you said, when I was very transparent.
Right.
It would be one thing to say, like, I want this kind of birth, and then I sign on with her and I'm like, just kidding, I want something different. But I was very honest up front and like what I was looking for. And she said she could provide that and it didn't. And I remember like lying in the bathtub, my boyfriend and the doula at the side of the bathtub, and like looking around the corner into my bedroom, and I can see her like on her laptop, just like typing away. And I remember being like, wow, that feels off. Like, not that I even needed anything in that moment that the two of them could not handle, but the fact that there were eyes anywhere other than me, and there was a screen between us. I just remember feeling like really disjointed there. And so I labor through the night, and it's just incredibly painful because the baby's not ready. And she like comes into the bathroom at one point. He's like, we're gonna go get breakfast. Do you want anything?
What?
Yes. And so I'm full throes in labor. And she and her midwife assistant, who I've met 2 times, leave to go get breakfast. And then they come back and it's still just like really hard. So I try and get out of the bathtub and into the bed, and I have her check me. And I do not know what she did, but my labor entirely shifted then.
Oh.
I go from maybe like a 7 to like a 12 out of 10, excruciating pain. And I start having terrible back labor. So every time I'm having a contraction from my neck down, I'm shaking uncontrollably. Like I cannot get a hold of myself. I cannot get back into my body. And so I decided to just like take some time alone. I go off into a room alone and I'm like trying to breathe through things, trying to like just gather myself back up, because I can tell like I've fractured and I can't seem to like get a grasp on reality. I can't seem to like get into my body. I can't like tune in with my baby. And at one point she kind of like knocks on the door and comes in and was like, hey, is it okay if I like check heart tones and just see like how baby's doing? And I'm like, okay, yeah, because at this point I'm starting to feel like something's got to be wrong. Something's got to be wrong. It shouldn't hurt this bad. I shouldn't feel so just disoriented. And she says, like, I'm seeing a lot of like D cells here. Like his heart rate is shooting up and then dropping down, then shooting up and then dropping down. And I think that we should monitor it kind of closely because this could be reason for a transfer. And just the words immediately, like my heart sinks because I know what happens when you go to the hospital. And so over the next, 30 minutes or whatever, she's monitoring heart tones periodically. And she just says, like, we're not at a state of emergency yet, but I think it could get there. And it would be better to get there, give yourself time to make a decision than it would be for you to have to be transported by ambulance.
It's like they line them up and have them practice the same scripts for years. Like, this is a textbook comment that they all make. It's really weird.
Yeah. And it was just like, she was tired of being there.
Of course.
And like now I can look back and see that like my doula would have 1,000% supported me in staying home. But I didn't know at the time that I was looking for someone to save me. I was looking to be saved in that birth. And she was the one who was saying, like, I can get you out of this. I can just take you to the hospital and we'll just.
This is what is so heartbreaking, because, back to the sister piece, like, it's very normal for a first time mom and second, third, fourth, and fifth, but it's very normal for a mom new to this arena to look for someone to save her. That isn't a problem. That really isn't a problem if the midwife has any integrity at all. I go to births all the time where they're like, please save me, please check me, please do things like medical shit to me. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely not. But yeah, I totally get it, because I'm not going to violate you and we're not going to pretend that that's going to do shit to you. I'm going to stand here and fucking believe in you, and we're not going to talk about transfer. Like, move on, girl, and this is the piece of just absolute lack of space holding, that you being so disoriented after being fisted in your body in the middle of labor and then assessed and told something. I mean, just the whole thing. Like, you were honestly doomed,
Yeah,
honestly, with
absolutely.
that kind of shitty support.
Just hearing the word transfer,
Right.
they're just like adrenaline coursing in my body,
Oh,
which is not conducive to a baby coming out. And so she then, like, one final time, like, checks heart tones and is just like, I think it's time we start considering a transfer. And it's like, I remember this feeling of like the world started spinning around me. And I like completely pulled out of labor land. And I was like, okay, there's a diaper bag there. There's onesies there. I need diapers, grab my phone charger, this, that it was like, not only did I completely shift modes out of that, but again, it was this feeling that I can now recognize of like, I was just waiting for someone to make the call.
mhm.
I was waiting for someone to say something is wrong so that I could get out of that situation. And then,
And to be fair to you, she had been priming you for that since you had the audacity to stay pregnant past 42 weeks. Like, you were primed, and it's subtle, but in hindsight, you can probably see it. Like, even being convinced and manipulated and coerced to take a toxic drink, it's all pathologized. It's all, you're wrong. You need to get in line, and it may or may not work. Like, it's so deep, and it can, in a way, it's subtle. It's actually quite overt, but looking back, right? Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
not just that you were looking for someone to make the call. It's like she started fucking with you weeks prior. And so it feels like you're backed into a corner.
yeah. And the irony of it is, if I would have just waited till 42 and 6 and gotten transferred, probably would have had the same or a better outcome because my baby would have been born by then.
Yeah.
So we drive to the hospital, and we're going to a hospital further away because my doula knows more of the staff there. And it was just a better quality hospital. We'd never factored it in because I wasn't planning on going to the hospital. But just like an excruciating ride, as you can imagine, in full-blown labor. And then it's just, once we're at the hospital, it's more tracking, monitoring the baby's heart rate. It's Pitocin. I am shaking uncontrollably still. It takes them probably 20 or 30 minutes to get the epidural placed because I'm having contractions 2 to 3 minutes apart and violently shaking with everyone. And so they can't get it placed. And then after that, they're like, well, do you want to try the peanut ball? And so I've been at 7 centimeters, let's say, for, I don't know, 15, 20 hours, something like that now. And the nurses keep coming in, and it's like, yeah, well, he's kind of still like, I don't know that it's a boy at this point, but they're like, yeah, the baby's heart rate is up and down, and we just don't know. And I'm like, what the hell? I don't know what to do here. And ultimately, I get Pitocin. I ask for the lowest dose of Pitocin possible, and I can just tell that I'm inconveniencing every one of them. And so eventually they kind of come in and they say, like, hey, it's been, 30 hours now. You haven't progressed past a 7, and his heart rate is really unpredictable. We can continue to wait it out, or we can get your baby out and we can book you in for a C-section. And like in that vulnerable state of like not having like eaten and just being completely like attached to this idea that you're going to get to hold your baby so soon. You're like, I can't get to the end here and lose my baby. And they make it seem like such an easy decision of like, yeah, we can all but guarantee we can just get this baby out right now. It'll be
It's like
so
ordering off a menu.
no, totally.
Yeah.
It really was that they were like, we can wait it out, or
Risky business, letting your body do it. Cool.
or we can schedule you in for a C-section, and that's probably the safest. And they even said the same line of like, we can do it. It's not an emergency now, but it could progress to that very quickly.
Yeah.
And then you may have to be put under for your C-section.
My God, it's such like classic coercion.
Yes.
They're
And just like very blatant fear mongering that it's like, if you don't, then this. And so I just remember like asking everyone to leave the room and just talking with my boyfriend and my doula and being like, I just don't think I have it in me anymore. And like in that moment, you already start to plant the seed for failure as if you've done something wrong. And so they take me back for the C-section. And it's like oh, I remember right before I went in, one of the nurses goes, "This can be a happy occasion. Do you want us to play a certain song?" And I remember looking at her and I go, "If this is an emergency and you really need to get my baby out, get my baby out. I don't care what music's on."
Mm.
And I just remember the feeling of like, I'm worried about my child's life, if that's really what's going on here. And you're worried about what song you can play in the background for me, as if now is the time to introduce some sort of like humane comfort.
Measure. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
comical.
And so I'm wheeled back and you're laying down, like arms flat out on the table, and they start, and you can feel just like the pressure and the movement. And before you know it, my baby is there and I can see him. And like, I'm so thankful that immediately I just knew him. I just see his face and I'm like, of course it was you. I've known you all along. And I'm just so thankful that the drugs didn't override that, because I think that that's a common story. But I saw my baby and I'd never known a love like that before, but I knew that I knew him the whole time. And so they pass him over and we're just kind of like doing the head snuggle that you get to do, but all you want to do is like just grab your baby and protect him from everyone and everything in this bright, cold, sterile room. And then they get him kind of like bundled up and back onto my chest. And I mean, seriously, it is a matter of minutes. I cannot believe how quickly they can get a baby out of you and get you back up. And then they're like, all right, assembly line, move it along. And so I'm just holding him and bawling, just like relief is the feeling that I'm like, okay, he made it. He's here. We can do this. And he latches right away. And then the next few days at the hospital is like just fighting them tooth and nail. They want to give him the erythromycin. They want to vaccinate him. They don't want me to co-sleep with him. They offer me formula on the first day. And so just all of the textbooks things, like a nurse comes in and tells me like, well, when mama is sleeping, baby should be in the bassinet. And I just tell her like, I'm not going to kill my baby. I've got this, thanks. And every single nurse that comes in is like, so we see you haven't vaccinated him yet. Are you ready to do that now? And I'm like, read my chart. And then you have a team for the mom and a team for the baby, and they're coming in at different times. And I just get them all together and I say, you guys can come in at once or don't come in at all, because we're not healing, we're not sleeping. So come in together or don't come in at all. And after all of this, I just remember feeling like, I can't trust any of you as far as I can throw you. So I don't sleep. So I slept the night that I started labor or the 2 days in the hospital. And there's one day that I distinctly remember I'm holding my baby and I'm looking across the room at the couch, and the pattern on the pillow starts dancing.
Yeah.
And I literally start hallucinating that like inanimate objects in the room are moving, because I have not slept, because I do not trust what they're going to do to me or my baby.
I mean, smart, I've heard way too many things about women saying no to vaccines and they wait till the mom's asleep and the nurses do it.
Yeah. And so I just remember like I am running on fumes at this point. And yeah, I start hallucinating and I just turn to my boyfriend and I say, you've got to get us out of here.
Yeah.
And so he had jaundice and they wanted to do all of the tests and they're saying his numbers aren't great. And so we might need to keep you guys another day. And my boyfriend just says, I don't think you understand what I'm saying here. We're leaving tomorrow regardless. Get us the paperwork if you need us to get us the paperwork, but we're leaving. And they're like, well, jaundice can cause brain damage and it's really important. And he just is like, get us the paperwork. And I remember just like feeling again relief of like, okay, he's got it taken care of. We're going to get out of here. I get my baby home and there's an immediate down regulation in our nervous system that I'm like, I did not realize how hard I was having to fight until we got home. And I look at this baby and I just weep. And I'm like, there was never anything wrong with him. I am sitting in my home looking at this perfect baby, and I know without a shadow of a doubt, there was never anything wrong with him. And I just go through this really big process of like apologizing to him. I just tell him like, hey, bud, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that this was our story and that it unfolded this way and never wanted this for you. I need you to know that, like, as your mom, I'm committed to doing better and that this will change everything for us going forward. And it was so sweet. He would just lock eyes with me and then he'd stare off into space, kind of like integrating it. And he'd come back to me and I'd say, like, I just want you to know I'll continue to do this, whatever it takes. You're worth all of it. And he would just look off into space and he'd come back to me and I could just feel his little body soften.
Oh,
Like, okay, mom, I trust you. We're here. And so after that, it was like, nothing for the medical system. It's like, we're not doing your well visits. We're not doing anything. You haven't touched my baby.
fool me once.
Yeah, none of it. And so after that, I'm like, I don't think I could go through it again. And then immediately I'm like, I love this baby so much. I definitely have to have another baby.
Just a different way.
Yeah. And so at that point, then we like, I mean, that kind of trauma really takes a toll on you.
That's what I was just gonna ask. Like, what is your integration process? Like the thought I had when you said you came home and kind of realized how high up you were and how traumatized is like my thought was like that shit takes years to come down from. Like that is a big experience, what you just articulated so well. So what happens in your processing until your next pregnancy? I'm not sure when that is. And it sounds like you are very clear that none of that needed to happen.
Well, at that time, I'm not. At that time, I'm still kind of, I'm like, forget the system. I don't want to partake in it. But my baby is perfect. So how did things get crossed? And
Right.
I remember I was actually sitting in a community call with you, and it was my first call. And I just say, like, yeah, I'm new here and I just had a baby and it didn't go the way that I wanted. And you just say, like, do you want to share your story? And I'm thinking, like, oh, I wasn't really like ready, but yeah, like it feels big and it's in me and it hasn't like come out yet. And I like tell like a high level version of my story because I'm just like not ready to get into the meat of it yet. And I remember you asked, like, well, why would you give a like a tachycardic baby Pitocin? And I remember that was the thread for me. It's like, wait a minute, why would you give a tachycardic baby Pitocin? And just like that, everything came crashing down for me. After that call, I questioned all of it. And then I could very clearly see my midwife's intentions and the transfer and how it all worked for the C-section. And there's more money to be made in a C-section. And of course, I could have had plenty of time. And my baby would have been probably born by 42 and 6. And so then I'm just kind of sitting with this mess of like, oh, so this is the truth. Like it is really just like hit in my body. And I've been in therapy throughout this, but I do some EMDR, a lot of relationship work because we just about like split.
Was he? Yeah, say more about that because I think this is very, very common.
Yeah, and it wasn't even, we didn't realize how much we were fighting each other as opposed to like the outward system. So it's like, I think he felt so purposeless, kind of alone. He was like, I didn't protect you in the way that I thought I was going to be able to. He's like, I feel like I broke before you did. And that was really like upending for me. And I'm thinking like, why did no one ask any questions? Why did no one just say, what happens if we don't transfer? And so we really went through it like kind of a roommate situation, it felt like, for a while we both internalized loving this little baby so much while also sitting with this heavy, heavy grief that we'd both gone through. So after therapy, both couples and individual, EMDR, we kind of get to this place of like, again, understanding the truth, not the manufactured truth, but like really what happened here. And we make our way to wanting a second baby. And
would you articulate when you say like knowing the truth, not the manufactured truth? Would you kind of articulate that a bit in terms of your reconciliation of your relationship?
yeah, again, another encounter with you and the membership, I attended a call on the tools. And it was so confronting for me that I remember the time I heard them, I was like, how dare anyone think I had anything to do with this. I told everyone what I wanted. So that was like definitely them. They did this to me. And then I remember just getting like little insights. I think I watched the like recording of it multiple times and I was like, wait, but I did play a part in this. And just kind of learning to piece out the very nuanced difference between guilt and blame and responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And once I finally got my footing in that, it was just this lightening that I had in my spirit that was like, if I can take responsibility for this and just my responsibility, because I'm not the only responsible party here, but if I can just own the role that I played in this, I can make sure this doesn't happen again. Because ultimately, I did consent to the midwife. I consented to her assistant. I consented to having a vaginal exam. I consented to the cease. All of this, there were so many checkpoints along the way in which I said, okay. And
the most important one, I would say, is before all of that. It's the actual initial engagement in a hierarchical dynamic, which, right? Because once you're in labor, like, yes, of course, there's responsibility, of course. And, the vulnerability and easily influenced state once you're in the birth process, comes with its own tricky business. But the choice to engage with a medical provider, essentially, even though she was cool or whatever, whatever that means in this context, doesn't sound cool to me at all. But like that, and I'm saying that less so for you and more so for women like who are trying to wrap their heads around this, because yes, there's always responsibility to take at every step of your life. And I guess I'd kind of say like it's kind of unreasonable once you're in the birth process to feel like you can be making super conscious, like logical, self-protective decisions. It's very hard, which does play back into the relationship stuff, because women emerge from these traumatic births feeling a lot of betrayal, from all parties. And one of the obvious arenas they would explore is their partner. And you were right there and you were sober, like you weren't in birth. And so why did this happen? And why didn't you speak up? And then the partner is like, I didn't even realize that would have been appropriate. Like we hired, and men don't usually have the words for this, but what they're trying to say is we hired someone to make the decisions. Like, why would I question her authority? She has our baby's life in her hands. Like, I thought that was the setup, And so it's just so painful because it's all so legit. It's so legit that because I don't know if I'm articulating this well, but because as a family, you entered into a hierarchical, top-down dynamic, it suppresses then the ability for him to protect you. Why would he protect you? She's the savior. You don't protect someone from the hero. You protect them from so it just
exactly.
feel you. It's very, very complicated to unravel.
Yeah. And I think actually the half step kind of before the realization of responsibility is just like rage. I remember being like, I'm going to call her. I'm going to like leave a scathing review wherever I can. Like, I was like, this is your fault. This is your fault. You did this. You failed us. And I think like that's kind of a natural progression of getting to the responsibility portion of it. But then I remember just being like, such a freedom from my own thoughts around it of like, it's actually really beautiful that I am here. And it's unfortunate the lesson that I had to take to get to this place. But it plays a big role when I decide to get pregnant again.
Sure.
Because I know what I want. And then I just am asking myself, like, oh, you're pretty pitiful. Are you committed to feeling that way? And I'm like, yeah, actually I am. And just yeah. And to be able to sit and be honest with myself of like, oh, you're really just like grumbling around about stuff. Are you committed to that? And I'd be like, no, this is so not a big deal. I can let that go. And it made things so much more just like authentic. Yeah.
Women get so upset with me when I introduce the tools, and I usually say something like the tools can help you stop lying to yourself. You know, if you want to stop lying to yourself, that's what they've helped me do. At least when I lie, I know that I'm doing it now. And you know, women get so mad, they're like, I don't lie to myself. It's like, no, okay. But just those questions get you to like hack out the lie, you know, that you're stuck or that it's happening to you and all this. And then you can actually be honest. And there's so much freedom in being like, oh, okay, I'm being a victimy baby right now. And do I want to stay there? And then owning the yes, like, yes, I do want to stay there. I'm totally committed to blaming my dad or blaming my husband or blah, 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 you know, blaming my body. And like, I love this right now. This is giving me the dramatic juice I'm after. It's like so awesome. It's so freeing to own our commitments, whatever they may be.
And it feels like even if you are owning the commitment of being whiny baby, there's play in that now because you're like, now I can really just like
Yes.
wrap this up and I can really whine about it. And then sometimes that's what I needed. Then it's just gone.
Exactly.
But I remember like being committed to like shoulder dystocia. My baby's definitely going to get stuck. My baby's definitely going to get stuck. My mom had C-section. My grandma had C-section. I mean, my sister had vaginal birth, but like she's smaller than me and maybe it's different. And like, and I would just finally get to like, I'm asking myself multiple times a day, are you committed to your baby having like experiencing shoulder dystocia? Okay, no. And then it's like, it would come up again. And I'm like, okay, so you're lying to yourself because the question continues to come up. So clearly somewhere in you, there is a commitment that you think this is going to happen because it keeps coming up for reevaluation.
Or another way of saying it is that it feels, some part of you feels like it's responsible to really try that on. You know, there's some sort of, it can be sneaky where it feels logical and practical to consider the worst case scenarios. And before you know it, you're like obsessing over them and actually looping in them. But there's a part of the strategy that feels like you're being responsible by doing that.
Especially if there's no midwife involved, especially if there's no authority involved, because now I'm the authority. So they would be worrying for me. So now I must worry for myself.
Yeah, it's like at what point do women think they become adults? Like at what point are we supposed to like take care of our children? Is it after the C-section? Is it after the pediatrician has signed off on them?
When do they hand off? Like when
is it our baby that we're responsible for them as much? And that's another interesting thing with the tools around. I see women weaponize the concept of responsibility over the baby as if, like, let's say if a baby dies, that they take responsibility for that. Like, you don't take responsibility for someone else dying. I mean, I guess unless you kill them, which is not the case in these situations, at least not at all, in my opinion. So let's go back to your partnership. So you guys really sound like you do the work. It's hard. And the tools help unlock a lot of movement in this idea of responsibility. And what happens next as you move into the next pregnancy?
Yeah, so it really feels like a peeling back of layers of like getting to myself. And with the tools, I realize that like a lot of what I'm thinking is they're just like not my own thoughts, that I've been kind of influenced by whatever. And so after all of this work in our relationship, I'm like out loud asking myself these questions, like, are you above the line? Or are you below the line? Are you committed to this? Yes, no. And then once we decide that we want to have another baby, I immediately feel like the authority of my own birth, of my own pregnancy. And like maybe on a larger scale, like kind of in my home, that I'm like, this has to orient around me. And there was a certain kind of self-assuredness that I had, that I was like, I can trust myself to make decisions. No one knows my body better than me. No one knows my baby better than me. I know that I can do this. And so, yeah, we decide to get pregnant again, and we get pregnant right away. And there's some shakiness in terms of like, okay, how am I going to do this? I opt out of the system again completely. No one, hard pregnancy. I felt like I was sick throughout, gave me lots of opportunities to practice. Like that really was what it felt like a practice of truth, of like what's real for you here.
Yeah.
And Yeah, over and over again. But yeah, I just knew I could bet on me. I knew I could bet on me making the decision. And
And
go ahead.
so is this imply that you're already like fully aligned with a wild pregnancy and a free birth?
Yeah, well, not a free birth at this time. I'm still thinking that I'm going to bring my doula in. She really was fantastic. And again, like looking back, I know that she would have supported the birth that I wanted, but I was looking for something different at the time. I wanted a midwife to save me. And so I'm thinking like, yeah, I really loved having her there. Truly, again, the sisterhood piece. It's like she was just there to like offer drinks of water and like give me hip compressions and things like that. And so I'm thinking I'm going to have a home birth with my boyfriend and my doula there. And that's what we're going to do. Go through the pregnancy. It's uneventful. It's hard in another way just because I have a 2-year-old at the time now. And so that's just toddlerhood and pregnancy hard mix. But get through to the end of it and I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to have probably another 41, 42-week baby. And so I'm like mentally prepared there. And I just don't care. I'm like, I'll go to 49 weeks, 50 weeks. This thing can come out 4 years old. I'm not going to the hospital. I've got this. And yeah, it's like everything was just different. I am the morning of, I
Your partner's down.
totally,
Like,
totally 100% down. He's like, yeah, let's do this. And it's like we have these like kind of giddy side conversations in the months leading up to it, like, are we really gonna do this?
yeah.
I think we can really do this. And it's like, no, we can totally do this. We can totally do this. But like, it's like, okay, but it's like, it's just going to be us. And we're like, yeah, it's just going to be us. And then it becomes kind of a game when people are asking, like, you're going to do a home birth after a C-section? And we're like, yeah, we're totally going to do it. And so it's, yeah,
And
you're
the doula is all good with a sovereign birth?
totally.
And would this be her first one?
Yep. Yep. And I had mentioned that to her with my first pregnancy. I had said like, hey, I don't really want someone who's going to be very hands-on. How do you feel about attending birth this way? What is birth? And she was like, I would be willing to be. I was like, oh, I told her, I have one more midwife to talk to, but if I don't like this midwife, would you be comfortable with it just being us? And she said, yeah, I've never attended a birth in that capacity before, but I'd be willing to. And so again, totally willing to. We've had a relationship through my first pregnancy. So we're like friends at this point, hanging
Love
out. And so boyfriend's totally down. And morning of labor, I just go to the chiropractor. I'm 39 weeks and 2-ish days. And I'm potty training my toddler. And so he goes potty while we're out of the chiropractor. And so it's like, all right, let's go get like a little reward. We go to the craft store and I'm kind of just like feeling crampy and achy. And then before I realize that I'm in the store, like holding the shelves, swaying back and forth, like, man, these feel intense. If I've got a couple more weeks, I don't know if I'm going to be able to like last at this level for a few more weeks. And my son's like kind of like moseying around the craft store, can't decide which like craft he wants. And at the end, I'm like, buddy, I need you to pick because I don't know if I'm going to be able to drive home. And so we get the craft and we go home and I'm trying to like reheat his lunch. And I can't because every probably, I don't know, 5 or 7 minutes, I'm having to pause and lean over my couch or go to the stairs or lean over the counter and like breathe through contractions. And I'm still totally delusional at this point. I'm like, wow, this is so intense. I can't imagine that I could do this for several more weeks. And my poor toddler, he's like, Mama, I'm hungry. And it's been 45 minutes. I'm not even making a lunch. I'm just reheating a lunch. And I haven't gotten around to it.
Barely.
So
but you're actually having a baby.
Yeah. And I feel so bad. He's hungry. And that like, it dawns on me. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's taken me 45 minutes to just heat this food up. I got to call my boyfriend. He's like downstairs working in the office. And I'm like, so I need you to come up and make lunch because I can't get through it. And he goes, is that you moaning upstairs? And I was like, yeah, I think this might be the real deal. And so he like wraps up at work, heats lunch up for my son and then puts him down for a nap. And then once my son is kind of out of the picture, I am just like moving through contractions on different surfaces, just really breathing through it. And it's intense, but none of it is painful.
Mm.
And I think that that's worth noting that like I've really been steeped in like some potent medicine here. Like I
Mhm.
just came out of Yolanda's portal
Mhm.
cohort, and I had done the self-healing module that she had created. And so I've run the tools and then portal and then self-healing.
You're ready.
I've done like big spiritual medicine here. And yeah, I'm just breathing through them. And I'm getting these like visuals. I can see my pelvis, like in my third eye, I can like see my pelvis moving and my baby reorienting themselves
Hmm.
through. And I can hear the voices of my ancestors in my head. And I had done a retreat previous to getting pregnant in Asheville and like really done some deep ancestral work about like clearing up our lineage. I'd also sat in a medicine ceremony and had like a total just obliteration of self that was related to just like femininity and the mother line, and that like this is the way of the new matriarch in your lineage. And so I can hear the voices of my ancestors in my head, and they say, like, you've got to get in the bathtub. And I'm like downstairs, and I'm like, I can't get upstairs. Like, these are too intense. And so I finally make my way upstairs, and I'm breathing through contractions, and I'm talking to my baby, and it all feels so different than it did before. It's like I've done this 1,000 times before. I know exactly how to breathe. I know exactly how to move.
Hmm.
There's no one there. It's like my boyfriend is just like offering snacks and drinks and just like sitting very quietly. And like I say, he was just like holding the perimeter. Like I could feel his presence. He wasn't, like cheerleading me or like, you're doing a great job. It was just like occasionally like, yeah, you're breathing through it, or like, I'm here, or like, here's a drink. And then I get out and I'm laboring in the hallway. And again, just like breathing, breathing, breathing. He goes down to get a snack, and I'm still not like convinced that I'm having a baby today. And he was like, I think we're going to have a baby today. And I was like, we're going to have a baby like really soon. And I hear again my ancestors' voice, and they say, like, you've got to get on the toilet. And I'm like, absolutely not. Because I had used the bathroom throughout this labor, and it was so intense. I was like, I don't want to go back there. And they're like, you've got to get on the toilet. And so I'm like hovering, kind of like squatted over the toilet with a towel under me. And I can feel my body just take over. I'm no longer pushing, and it's just bearing down, just moving my baby, moving my baby, moving my baby. And I'm like talking to my baby, I'm like, please slow down. We don't need to move this fast. We can slow down. And it's just like not happening. And my baby comes just blasting out of me. And my boyfriend catches him. I unwrap the cord, and he's like asleep. And I just bring him to my chest, and he kind of like wakes up and comes to and lets out like a couple little groans. And I'm just bawling. And I just remember saying, like, thank you, God, thank you, ancestors, thank you, God, thank you, ancestors. And the difference is that I didn't ever feel relief because I was never in danger. And I remember that being such a different experience, that in the hospital I was like, oh, thank God my baby's here. We were in so much danger. Like, we finally made it. Oh my God, he's here, he's here, he's here. And with my second birth, I was just like, of course you're here. It was nothing but gratitude. It was the difference between relief and gratitude. And I was like, we figured it out. And at that very moment, maybe like 2 minutes after my baby emerges, um, my older son wakes up from his nap. He's slept the whole time,
Nice.
and comes down the hallway and like peeks around the corner, and he's just like observing him. He goes like, it's so little and he's wet. And just like it's a lot to wake up to after a nap. There's just like a whole baby, and I'm covered in blood. And so he just takes it all in. And then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go to bed. And I'm placenta's still inside. I'm holding the baby. My boyfriend helps me to bed, and I go to lift my leg up to get in bed. Placenta falls out on the floor.
Nice.
I climb in bed, snuggle up with my baby, and that's the whole thing. My mother-in-law comes to get my oldest son so he can have a sleepover. We get to tell her, like, not only did labor start, it's done, and you have a grandson.
Oh.
And so I'm just like resting in bed, and it was just a completely different experience. My boyfriend and I just like kept looking at each other and being like, so we have a baby now. And I remember on day 2, like night 2, I could not sleep because the oxytocin was bumping in my body. I'm so high that I am just laying in bed, smiling at either side of me, being like, oh, I love my family so much. I love you guys so much. And I'm just like whispering it under my breath as if like I'm gonna wake them up. But I am high as a kite on
Yeah.
just like,
It's not just oxytocin, it's like DMT,
I am, yeah, it is
you know? Yeah.
totally psychedelic. And I'm just like, I have this little present, which is my baby. And I'm just like, I love you guys so much. I love you guys so much. And I could not sleep because it was just whole.
Yeah.
And it was this feeling of like a cycle that had not been able to be completed, had finally completed, and just a completely different story. And just for that story to exist for my son, for both of them,
Mhm.
and now I hold them both with such great reverence for different reasons because they both offered such potent medicine. And the integration has just been so seamless.
How long ago was this?
He will be 4 months.
Oh, pretty fresh.
Yeah, next week.
And how do you feel like 4 months in this has shaped you or changed you as a woman?
I feel like a completely different human.
Mm.
Like more so than just the initiation into motherhood, there is just affirming of foundation of I can always trust myself,
Mm.
that I can trust myself to find truth. I can trust my partner to believe in that truth and to support me through that. And that I can truly like change the course of my lineage. That I sometimes just wonder if there was a part of me that needed to relate to that old story of like, we have C-sections.
Mhm.
And then to say, no, we don't have to. We don't have to. There can be a different path. And another story for another day, but it's like in the process of all this, like my sister and I went through our first pregnancies together. Since my second pregnancy, I completely cut my mom and my sister off.
Oh,
They
snap.
may or may not know that I have a second child.
Oh, that's big.
And it really was like this massive 180 of I was like, you cannot respect my boundaries. And so now
Mm.
you can be in my life. And so yeah, just like major,
Mm.
major movement in that arena. And it did take like standing up to say, like, no, now I'm the matriarch of this lineage and I get to do things differently.
Mhm.
So that's exactly what I've done. And it
Yeah.
just feels, yeah, it feels so settled to say like I got to choose this and I get to choose anything. I get
Mhm.
to choose the yeses in my life and the nos in my life. And if I want to redo something or not do something, that like I just feel really sure of myself, which is obviously very different from coming out of a C-section feeling like you failed,
Yeah. So
healed.
hard.
Yeah. And so yeah, it's just very different. It's like meeting yourself for the first time
Mm.
at 30 years old.
Hmm. Hey, as long as it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the C-section note is interesting because it's like actually your lineage doesn't have C-sections. And then there's this like really, really short blip where
Mhm.
they had a couple, but like really, really short,
Yeah.
like really you and everyone is from this like epically long lineage of sovereign intact birth.
Yeah.
I think it's always so important as we're like walking with these stories of our very recent people. It's like, yeah, totally. And that does form us and it does shape us, of course. And actually, all of our ancestors know birth.
Mhm.
That's how we got here.
Yeah, and to hear those voices throughout my labor was just
So
so
cool.
affirming that they were like, we are here and we know how to walk this path and we can help you walk this path.
So who did you do ancestry work in Asheville with?
Oh, I cannot remember. I think her name is maybe Michelle.
Rochelle.
I don't know, but it was seriously
Oh, I want to know because I'm 2 hours from there.
yeah, she practiced like the Dagara tradition out of Africa with Elder Malidoma Somé.
I don't know these words.
and
I don't know what all of it.
did like big spiritual work there
Cool.
that, yeah, just like allowed for this to unfold.
Cool. Another woman I had on the podcast recently did ancestor work in Asheville, but it was with someone else. So I was wondering if it was the same person, but she said, yeah, very similarly, she just learned how to listen to her ancestors, and they showed up in her pregnancy through doing shamanic drumming, and they just said, we've been waiting for a mother in your line. I know she says it better than I can right now, but she said that they all just showed up, like many of them, all females, and said, we've been waiting for a long time for a woman in our line to want this and to want to listen. It's like so moved by that. It's like, wow.
The threads that kind of that weave in there. When I was sitting in a plant ceremony, I had this vision of returning to a village with like mud huts, and there were just women pouring out of these huts, and they just shouted, "Welcome to the land of many mamas. We've been waiting for you."
Whoa.
And so like that was just a piece of that ceremony, but it was, yeah, it's like the voices are there, the ancestors are there. This isn't new,
Mm,
old,
really
it's
isn't.
ancestral.
It's like literally how we're the
Yeah,
opposite of new. It's so ancient.
practice of listening, the practice of listening and the practice of remembering.
It's beautiful.
Really honest with yourself, because listening and remembering don't do you anything if you're not willing to
Right.
keep yourself in it.
And how do you feel like this has shaped or changed your relationship?
We're maybe like bordering arrogant now. We're like, we did it. We
Yeah.
did a thing. It's like there's this feeling of just like hope and possibility, and also just like deep repair for
Mm-hmm.
just forgiveness for each of us, of like, I'm sorry I didn't protect you, and I'm sorry I held so much resentment silently for you. And yeah, just really a coming together of um just what is and what could be, because it has really healed all of us in a big way.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Imagine the ripple effect of all of these families choosing to birth intact and family centered and emerging with no trauma and all the healing that's occurring. I mean, like a big deal how fast this stuff is happening and how quickly it changes a woman and therefore a family.
Well, and the trauma that they warn you about is not the trauma you have to worry about. I absolutely terrible tear,
Hmm.
obliterated.
Wait, with your second,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah.
And I just am healing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like those are, I guess, the traumas that you worry about. Some
Yeah.
people that you're going to tear, you're going to have prolapse or a shoulder dystocia, but it's like no one talks about the emotional trauma that they're just waiting on the sidelines to inflict upon you.
Well,
It's like a
also,
tear is nothing. Like a tear,
right. Well, also, no one understands anything about spontaneous healing and no one believes in the body. So I mean, not no one, some people do, but as you allow your body to heal and to repair itself, I mean, I always think about nature. Like, have you ever come across, a deer that had torn all the way to her rectum after birth? Like, no, that wouldn't make sense. That's not biological. It's not physiological that you would hurt yourself in birth. Just doesn't really make sense. And then if you have a physiological tear, of course it wants to heal. Of course it will. But that is definitely something women really are quite programmed about. It's one of the most common questions, well, what will I do if someone's not around to suture me? Why would you need to be sutured? Whoa.
the idea of like a needle and thread re-entering that wound. Like I remember when I visually saw the wound for the first time, I was like, I think this is something that could require stitches, and I'm absolutely not going to have it done.
Well, it's completely subjective, right? Like guaranteed everyone in the system would have said it would require.
Mhm.
right? The fact that it's a no for you means it doesn't require it. And your yoni will heal, is healing. And there might be some differences about it, as as there are for me as well. For you've given birth now. Things will be different. How cool.
It is. It's all different.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the tools and for this space. It wasn't even on my radar. And again, like just seeing women do this work changes everything.
Yeah, it's ours. It's ours to have. All right, girlfriend. So nice to connect. Thank you. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed the show today. You can support this podcast by donating to it through the link in the show notes below. And of course, leaving an awesome review on whatever platform you listen on. The more reviews, the more visibility the show gets. So let's spread the good word of sovereign birth. Don't forget, you can watch our podcast interviews on YouTube and see the women as they tell their birth and power stories. And you'll also find our viral free birth collection of epic, raw birth videos on our YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We've always got a lot going on at Free Birth Society, and you can find out all about it at freebirthsociety.com, at Free Birth Society on Instagram, and opt in to my newsletter below. We offer courses on free birth, authentic midwifery, the blood mysteries, as well as one-on-one coaching, in-person retreats, and of course our annual women's gathering, the Matriarch Rising Festival. Our exclusive, private, vetted membership, The Lighthouse, is definitely something to check out if you're looking for a community of wise sisters to get guidance from and to meet in real life. Together we rise, sisters. We must speak our stories, fully claim our lives, and support one another. This is the living revolution, and I am so grateful to be in it with all of you. I'll leave you with our gorgeous Free Birth Society theme song, Wild Woman by Aruba Red. I honor you for the wisdom you held, the ancient traditions of plant medicine and womb magic. I feel the spirit of the ancestors as I place my hands upon my belly. This sacred portal will be honored. Eons upon light beams of survival, withstanding the eradication of our power by design. I will not allow the separation of our young to be forced upon me. My sisters will no longer birth in captivity. The picket line redefined from burning our wild women to paralyzing us and drugging our babes. Strapped down in a clinical white bed, drying up the milk from our breasts, keep your needles. My family will never again be doomed to chase those dragons or your poison. We reject your fear. We choose love. Everything with intention. Death, ascension. I will fly and bring her back from the stars. Conscious